So you've had a sneaky peek about the deliciousness of Nourish, but I'm going to tell you the story of Nourish and where I started, because it'll show you that everything that we're doing with Nourish is anchored in everything I've experienced in my life, touched in my life, and the people I've come across. A little bit blurred, she's blown up. My great Auntie May on the left-hand side is where I get my love of dressing up. So Auntie May was the great aunt that my sister and I always liked to go and stay with, because she was the one in Stoke-on-Trent that baked the Chelsea buns and had the big duvet, so we would wake up with the lovely smell of homemade jam, toasted crumpets. So food was evocative, food was emotional, and that's where I started. I actually was part of 3 in my family. So I had 2 siblings, and my dad, who was very relevant to everything that's happening within Nourish, was a retired chemistry teacher. And he really inspired me with a passion of science. So combine that with a love of food, and you'll understand this is everything that Nourish is set to achieve. A really key thing, though, that happened when I was 15 is I became incredibly unwell. And for 10 years, I spent a quarter of my life in hospital. Now, I don't know whether any of you have come across teenagers who have been really seriously unwell. You tend to go one way or the other. You can either get absolutely buried by ill health, or you can become incredibly tenacious, and you think life is short, life is precious, I'm going to go for it. Strangely enough, I went for the second. So I went and did a dietetic degree at Leeds University. And I thought I would come out with 2 things: an amazing medical knowledge, because it's really important you know exactly what goes on in the human body, but also a passion for food. I came out with 1, and definitely not the second. I was really appalled that when we were taught about someone that has a swallowing difficulty, and I'll come on into the drinks in a second because there are tricks there, we were taught that all you did was you took your normal meal, you put it in a blender, you whizzed it up, and you served it as a mush. And we're going back 30 years, and sadly, things have not changed. And actually, the other week, I had one beautiful patient of mine. Her mum had a motor neurone type disease, and she was admitted to a hospital. And she'd gone through such a degrading deterioration in her health. And she was an incredibly elegant woman. And in the hospital, which is a private hospital in London, I won't name it because you'll understand why, did exactly that. They bought, oh, here you go, Doris. This is the meal. Oh, whoops, swallowing difficulty. Hang on. 20 minutes later, they came back with the same food in a brown mush. And the daughter said, I'm not going to stand for that. And she actually broke into the hospital kitchens overnight. And she rang me from the hospital kitchens and said, Jane, I'm in the kitchen. What can I get for my mum? Because I'll be damned if I'm not giving her that brown mush. So we got the ice cream, we got the lovely sorbets out of the fridge and the freezer, and we gave her some dignity. So I decided after I did my degree that I would go back and do things differently. So I did my cordon bleu. And this is how I got to know the man on the left. Jamie Oliver came after me when he wrote his second book. And he said, oh, I gather you're a food-loving nutritionist. Because in those days, we were very much seen as dietitians, diet sheets, alfalfa sprouts, wheatgrass juice. But he said, you're a passionate foodie, and I am. So I did the big Jamie Oliver School Meals campaign, and this is really relevant because this is the first time in this country that we actually empowered people to make a difference in the community. So it was the school chefs, the cooks, the mums, the grandparents, the dads, and they actually stood, and we created a societal move to really look after the well-being of our children. And that is exactly what we're doing with Nourish. I was also very lucky to encompass and experience the man on the right. Mind you, I probably should preface that. Experience David Beckham, tough job for a woman. But I was really lucky. I helped David set up his football academy. And again, it was being disruptive in a sports place. I always set myself 5-year goals. So at the age of 25, when I had my last major surgery, I'd had about 20 surgeries before that, I was well enough to set up my own practice. I was the first dietitian in Britain to set up her own private practice. And actually, when I rang my professional body, they said, what do you mean you're going to set up a private practice? Are you just going to look after rich, fat people? I said, what happens to people who are struggling? I'm actually going to create the sort of practice that I wish I'd been on the receiving end of, because my mum was the one that snuck the soups into the hospital. baked the homemade soft lemon bread and really nurtured me through my ill health. So 25, I said, right, I'm going to write my first book. It was a Sunday Times bestseller. That launched me into the writing space. I've written 9 books. The 9th one is Nourish. And The Observer came after me for my first column. I was incredibly lucky. I launched my columns alongside the amazing Nigel Slater. And I loved writing for the Garden Observer. It was a really lovely place to start to talk about well-being, but it was always about food and love of food. And then you understood what goes on in the human body and what can benefit the human body through that specific food. Then the Times brought me over to launch Body and Soul for nutrition, and then the good old Daily Mail, love it or hate it. In those days, we had 8.5 million readers. The first article I wrote was my love of white bread. The furore that came from my profession was atrocious. They said, oh, you should be writing about granary bread and brown bread and shredded wheat and Weetabix, granary and whole grains. And I said, did you actually read the article? Because I was writing about people who are vulnerable. So like my late dad, who was struggling with his swallowing, someone as a younger child who's struggling to get enough nutrients inside their body, just read the article. It was a lovely, slow sourdough, and it was an amazing platform. 8.5 million readers. I wrote for them twice a week, so for 10 years I was a twice-weekly columnist. So content is my forte. When I was 30, I decided, because I couldn't have my own children because of the surgeries, that I'd go and find this little person on the right. So Maya, I adopted from India, and at the age of 15 months, she weighed 3.5 kilos. For those of you who know, that's probably birth weight for a lot of children. She had rickets, so you could put a football through her legs. She's now 19, she's a show jumper, and she's amazingly accomplished, and she's going to Africa next year to volunteer. But this was a really defining moment for me. I had all the theory, I had all the practice from my patients, but then I had all the emotion through me as a mother. And that's how we got Maya to be the accomplished, strong woman that she is. Then this other person is my gorgeous dad, who passed away in September of dementia. Now, for those of you who don't know, there's 850,000 people currently living with dementia. That is the absolute tip of the iceberg. That was pre-COVID. And I can tell you it's the most devastating thing that's ever hit the care homes, hit anyone in their own home. The dementia stats are going to be horrific, because the one thing that my dad wanted was connection, love, support, physicality, hugs. He was really disinhibited, so he was Mr. Bring Me Sunshine. And he absolutely loved his food. And my greatest moment is that I launched the Nourish drinks in time for my dad to love the chocolate one that you've just had. And you might think, oh, it's rather thick. It's purposely thick. Because when you have a swallowing difficulty, there's a massive education piece that we need to do. You might think if someone's choking or having difficulty swallowing, you need to give them a glass of water. Because that's really easy. It looks the simplest thing to have. You could actually kill them by doing that, because it doesn't use any of the muscles. It just goes down the trachea. So what you need to do is actually make it thick enough, and you'll see that the intensity of the chocolate, because it uses the same Barona chocolate that they use in Green and Black's chocolate, because Micah Carhill, who created Green and Black's chocolate with Craig Sams and Joe Fairley, created the drinks with me. So we use that lovely intense chocolate, because what you do is you put it in your mouth and it triggers the swallowing reflex, and all the drinks that we have are made with subtle but beautiful intense flavors. When I was talking at Litfest in the lovely Ballymaloe Cookery School, Dorina Allen invited me to talk there about 3 years ago, and I met this very familiar, amazing woman. Prue's mum also had dementia, and she came over to me and said, I'll be your patron. She said, I'll be a lousy patron, because I'll always be tweeting the wrong thing and I'll be in the wrong places. She said, but I love what you're doing. It's about time we did this, because it's the right thing to do. And we held a Nourish Afternoon Tea, and actually I bought the event that we were just at, was at the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, and it was the first Nourish Afternoon Tea, and we have subsequently taken it around the country with our horse box. And we had 150 people living in dementia. We had music. My dad could sing. We had the late Terry Jones. They're both disinhibited, so they were both trying to snog me. One was more appropriate than the other. But people living with cancer, with motor neurone disease. And the most shocking thing is, and this was pre-COVID, they said, no one ever invites us out for a beautiful tea. So we had the menus. They're all here. And I just wanted a real dignity, really gorgeous event. And then, as I say, I met a dear friend of mine, Micah Carhill, at St Pancras Station in the days when we could meet as we are, and it's great to be down here. And I said, Micah, for 30 years, I've been looking after patients struggling with cancer, dementia, motor neurone disease, eating disorders, as well as the professional athletes like David. I said, but that's currently what's on the market. Plastic bottle. Look at the ingredients. It's known by my patients as a chemical diet. No one wants to have it. They think I'm being poisoned. And to be honest, if I had that on my table, what's evocative about that? Does that inspire you to want to nourish yourself? No. I said, I want to design a drink that's really simply delicious, that has everything your body needs in it. It's made with organic ingredients, and it looks beautiful. And he said, I'll be delighted to, because actually Micah's son has autism. For those of you who don't know, autism can actually hit your ability to have anything that has anything other than a plain white and no flavour. And he said, I'm on my way to Great Ormond Street. He said, I don't want to give that crap to my son, so I'll happily help you. So we launched the drinks just before COVID. Always a good time to launch a business. And we slowly grew the audience. We grew the business. It's DTC, obviously. We deliver Nourish drinks directly to someone's door, because vulnerable people, and that can be a teenager struggling with anxiety, that can be someone that's got an eating disorder, someone who's bereaved. They don't go to supermarkets. Plus, I'm not going to compete in the supermarket space. So we deliver next day delivery. If you're worried about someone's nourishment, get straight on. And it's that lovely sort of nurturing, pay it forward element. It also means as we build our content, the Nourish newsletters, all of that, you can tangibly connect with people. And we've just had a recent supply issue, and our Trustpilot mating has gone up during that, because we have traditional customer service. We have an amazing woman called Sharon who has phoned every customer, because some people who are vulnerable, they don't want to get online, and they're not familiar with it. So we have two audiences. We have the me's that would have bought for my dad. We have the patients that buy for their loved one. So we wanted to have someone at the end of the phone, and we will grow that side, because as much as D2C is online, Shopify is amazing for that, I actually wanted to have that human touch. And that's how we've got through the recent problems that we've had, by having amazing customer service. We donated 6,500 drinks to key workers. And my investor said, what, first year of trading, you even give drinks away? I said, you've invested in me. And we are not going through a pandemic without supporting key workers, homeless groups. We have Spartans, which is an amazing charity up in Scotland. And they were looking after school meals going into children's homes during the pandemic. And we got a truckload of drinks up there because it was the right thing to do. You'll also see a young woman on the right who is living with a permanent stoma, because it's tough enough having a body that is challenged in that way without your whole life being those things. So it's really nice that equally, and it was really important, because when I was ill, I never ever wanted to be seen as ill. I never wanted to be seen as a patient. So she loves the fact that her young baby, or young child rather, at 3, can have the same drink, and they share it, and that's that connection. Challenge as a female founder CEO. I'll keep this one short. Be a swan. But I think it's an amazing, exciting moment in the history of Nourish, because we have seen during the last 2 years that what we were doing before has not worked. What they were doing in care homes has not worked. And we will see catastrophic stats. During the pandemic, there was a 68% increase in eating disorder referrals for young women and some young men. That's those that are referred. And do you know what happens? I had a patient the other day, she went along to casualty in a really difficult place, and getting to that place anyway. I'm not blaming the casualty, but they said, oh, look up a Be Happy website. Come on, we've got to do better than this, so we can, through our community and through the drinks, really make an enormous difference. So there in the top one, we've got the Spartans. We've got older people, their loved ones sent into the care homes. We've also got really young women. So in essence, my dream and my vision is during this next 2 years, we're going to be going for a next raise, because we can massively make an enormous difference to people who are struggling with their nourishment. Because rather like we did with the Jamie Oliver campaign, we're going to change people's lives and create societal change through the power of nourishment. And we're going to empower the vulnerable and everyone that cares about them.
Thank you so much, Jane. So what an incredible story. I think when we think about the direct-to-consumer channel, particularly if you're sort of beauty industry based like I am, you primarily think of sort of fast-moving consumer goods and sort of different types of products to Jane. So it's just incredible to have met you and to hear about this product coming and growing through this channel. So thanks, Jane. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And Jane's going to be here if anyone's got any questions for her.
Absolutely.